My name's Tom Fontana from the Ohio Soybean Council, and I want to welcome everybody today to our virtual field trip. We could also call it a virtual farm tour today. Today, we're going to be looking at one of our soybean farmers from Northwest Ohio. We're going to be joining Nathan Eckel, and Nathan is harvesting soybeans today, and we're going to talk about any number of things that are related to harvesting and soybeans. We hope you enjoy the tour today. The Ohio Soybean Council is interested in providing this information to students and teachers around Ohio. Our board thinks education is important. We have a website called grownextgen.org, which is very helpful to teachers in K through 12 around Ohio, and I encourage you to look at it. So with that introduction, we'll head out to Nathan's farm and start talking about what farmers do when they harvest.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing today? I hope all is well. Right now we're combining beans. It's a little gloomy here in Northwest Ohio, but things are going pretty good. Harvest is moving right along. But a little bit about myself. You hear the beeping in the background, that's just my monitors in the combine. A little bit about myself. I am a fifth generation farmer here in Wood County. My great-great-grandfather started farming, so we've just passed that down through the generations. Right now, currently, it's my two brothers and myself operate roughly 2,300 acres of farm ground here in Wood County. We also have that's my, you look on the screen, that's my wife and two boys right there. The oldest one's in preschool, youngest one, he's still not quite to school age yet, but my wife teaches second grade. That is, Dan, if you could put up our homestead there. That's my farm where I live currently. It's a real big barn. We store all our machinery in there. The little barn that kind of L's off the end, that's my farm shop where I do most of my mechanic work in there. So we do all that kind of stuff in there. And like I said, we farm 2,300 acres. We also have a cattle operation here in Wood County. My middle brother, Nolan, runs our cattle operation. We usually have somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 to 800 head of cattle on feed all the time. So we're constantly feeding, constantly cleaning pens out, hauling manure on our farm fields so that we have fertilizer, natural form of fertilizer for our crops to grow. That's basically what we do here. That encompasses our whole operation. Both my brothers also sell seed. We do a little bit of trucking on the side, and we also raise some hay and bale straw. So we're busy pretty much all the time around here. Like I said, we grow corn, soybeans, wheat. We also raise some cover crops. We have a variety of cover crops. Some of it's clover. We have a crop called triticale that we make for hay for the livestock. And then we also do some other cover crops that involve getting some root systems deep down into the soil to break up some compaction layers. And that's basically what we do. So I guess a little bit about what's in the combine right now. As you're looking at me here in the combine cab, the first thing you'll notice is my monitor over here. This is just an iPad like everybody else has, but I'll bring this over here so you guys can kind of see what I do. So right here in the combine cab, you'll see this monitor right here. This is mapping my yield as I'm going down through the field. It's giving me real-time information as to, let me flip this around so I can make sure you guys can see that real good. So this is giving me real-time data, and I know this is backwards to you guys, But this is giving me real-time data as to its mapping. I can overlay this with soil maps, and then draw prescription maps based upon that for fertilization. My other monitor down here, this controls all my functions of my combine. I can change different settings within the combine, the speed of how everything runs inside there. It kind of looks like a cockpit of a jet fighter if you ever seen the inside of one of these. Just a lot of buttons and different functions that I can change different applications here in the combine. But we've got a pretty good view of how everything works here in this combine. As I pan across here, I've got the platform that you see. What we call the platform is 35 feet across. You can see up here along the edge, there's a bunch of small knives up here on the front, and that's what cuts the crop, and it drags it into this this big drum that's right here at the end of my finger. That pulls it into what I call the feeder house, or the throat of the combine, and it's kind of dirty right now, but that pulls it into the machine and threshes the grain out of the pods. And we'll get down in here. I've got some time. I'm waiting on a grain cart to get back here so I can dump my load, but I'll walk around this combine here real quick, and I'll show you guys just how big this thing really is.
So a combine, for those of you who have never heard or seen of one before, is how a farmer harvests his grain, whether it be corn, soybeans, wheat, or whatever. So, and we'll go into how a combine works here in a little more detail in a few minutes.
So this is my combine, my harvester. As you can see, it's pretty big. With the hopper fully extended out like it is right now, I'm roughly I'm about 16 feet tall. With the hopper folded down, I'm about 12.5 feet tall, so I can fit it in underneath power lines and into my barn. We'll walk along the front of the header here. So as you can see, there's serrated knife edges. These knives cut the stalks as I drive through them. These guards keep those in place as these basically move back and forth, cut the crop. They'll go into this long drum here, go all the way down, and then, as I like to call it, go into the belly of the beast down in here. Goes right down, goes into that throat, and then into the main part of the combine.
Oh, very good. Nathan, can you go through and maybe the stages of growth on a soybean plant, and then how do you determine it's time to harvest?
Yeah, so we'll walk right out into these soybeans here that we've got standing. So obviously your first thing we plant beans that look. Yeah, we've got just after germination right there on your screen right there. They've just emerged out of the ground from the seedling. Actually, if you look at those two outer pieces that are on that plant right there, those are actually the actual bean itself. It's a little different than a corn plant. Corn plant, the seed will actually stay in the ground. But those first two leaves actually come out of the seed. You want to go to the next one, Dan? Yep, right there. That's what we call kind of the first trifoliate in there. They just after emergence, they're very at this stage of plant growth. They're very susceptible to stress. This is a key part in the development of the life of the soybean. And here we have the flowering stage. So as these plants grow, you'll see the flowers come up. The flowers are blooming, and from those flowers, if you look just below that flower, that purple flower, you'll see the beginning of a pod. And those pods start forming, and they will start producing the soybeans then. And that's when when the flower starts. That's when we get into the reproductive stages, what we call the R stages of the plant and its life. And then we're getting closer to maturity here at this point. And as you'll see these fields, if you've been out in the countryside, you'll see the field starting to turn a little golden brown. And that brings us to this field that we're in right here. So you'll see these pods, and kind of how I check them. You rip these plants off, and you can kind of pop these open, and those beans are right inside there. That's basically what this combine is doing. It takes these pods and it pops the pods open, and the seeds fall out and into the combine and then into my grain tank.
Very good.
So the grain cart just showed up here. We're gonna dump this out. My brother just got here. Is everything good, Nick? Is everything good? Okay.
Do we want to show when do you want to show the video, Director Dan?
Well, do we want to show the unloading here, and then maybe after we're done unloading, Nathan can take off a little bit and show us what it looks like on the inside there, and we can show the video about what's actually happening when we're going through the field.
So unloading the combine is very easy. I've just got my one button here. We press that, and the grain will start coming out. So it's taking, we've got the hopper, as you guys looked inside here. My hopper's full of beans, and we're dumping into this grain cart. The reason we have the grain cart here, we're a ways back away from the road, and we don't want to bring the trucks back in here. So we bring this tractor, our tractor and grain cart back here, and dump into that and basically transfer. And from there, we'll put it into the trucks and down the road and into what we call our elevator. And the elevator will then take those beans and store those. We sell these beans to the elevator. They write us a check for these soybeans. There's a couple different forms of elevators. The elevator that we haul to primarily is a cooperative elevator. So it's made up of member owners. So I'm a partial owner of this cooperative. And so I get a portion of the proceeds that the cooperative makes, and we sell them to them. And then from there, the cooperative will usually sell to an end user. Here in Toledo, where our primary port is along the Maumee River, a lot of those go via the Maumee River in one of those giant freighter ships. They go out there, and they actually will go out the Maumee River. If you've ever heard of the Sioux Locks up in Michigan, they go through the locks out the St. Lawrence Seaway out to the ocean, and then most of our beans get exported if they're not crushed right here for oils and that. And we'll get into different uses of the soybeans here a little later in our program. Dan, if you want to show kind of what the combine does, I'll get started back up here. I'll get my stuff situated, and then they can watch the combine actually harvest here.
All combines must perform 3 vital tasks to effectively harvest a grain crop: feeding, processing, and cleaning. The feeding system works by gathering the crop from the field and delivering it into the combine. The head gathers the crop by stripping, cutting, or picking it up off the ground. Different heads must be used for different types of crops. Once gathered, the feeder house receives the crop from the head and moves it to the processor for threshing and separating. All combines have a processor, generally a cylinder or rotor, designed to gently remove or thresh the grain from the plant. The rotor rotates in one direction, processing the crop material. As the material moves through the rotor, it rubs across a metal grate or concave. The rubbing action removes the grain from the plant material. The grain and some small material other than grain, known as mog, falls through the concave, where it's permanently separated from larger plant material. The larger straw and mog moves toward the rear of the machine for discharge. After the crop is threshed and separated, gravity causes the heavier materials, like grain, to continue to fall through the cleaning shoe. The chaffer and sieve move back and forth to separate the grain from the mog. This action ensures that the material is always moving. Once the grain is clean, it moves to the grain handling system for storage and transfer. The grain remains in the grain tank until it's offloaded using the unloading auger, which swings out from the combine over a grain truck.
Very good. I think Nathan's ready to start
All right,
combining in the
guys.
field. Are there any questions that any of the classrooms have at this point about what we've seen so far?
If you have any questions, feel free to wave at the camera or have somebody come up and stand up in front of it, and we will call upon you to give us an answer there, a question there. Looks like we have one from Johnstown, Ms. Derenberger's class. Way up here. Go ahead, buddy. You might need to unmute yourself.
What else do you have on your phone?
I'm sorry, Dan, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
What else do you have on your farm?
There you go, you heard it.
What else do I have on my farm? We do have some pigs. I guess I forgot to mention that. We do have some pigs on our here, I'll just hold this. This will be a lot better. We have some pigs on our farm. We've got semis, but primarily we're a grain operation is what we do here. That's our primary focus.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from any of the classes? There we go.
Does a tractor run on gas?
Is a tractor?
No, that's a great question. All of our machinery, I have 2 tractors that run on gas. All of our other tractors run on diesel fuel. But that leads me, that's a great question, that leads me to the uses for soybeans. So our soybeans, we take these soybeans here and they go to what we call a crusher. And we run a 20% blend of what we call biodiesel. And biodiesel is made from the oil in these soybeans. If you crush these soybeans, they produce an oil inside those soybeans. And we use that. There's companies out here that refine this oil, and we use that to power our machinery. So, you guys might talk a little bit about sustainability. Those sustainable things that we do here on our farm is we use a 20% blend of biodiesel here in this in our farm equipment. So great question, thank you.
We do have a question from Mrs. Kessler's class. I don't believe they have video, but we are going to unmute them. So if you can ask your question in Mrs. Kessler's class.
What do the soybeans do?
What do the soybeans do?
Correct.
So there's a ton of uses. I just covered one as our the biodiesel. So a lot of other uses for the soybeans are, we have your crayons that you guys used to color with, the ink in a lot of your textbooks, and those are oil uses. As you see here on the screen, that's a pig. So one of the byproducts of producing oil or crushing the soybeans is what we call soybean meal. So that's primarily used in a lot of livestock feeds, a lot of hog feeds. And then we also can use it for chickens. Chickens are a big user of soybean meal. Another cool thing that we're a part of here at the Ohio Soybean Council, we're finding some new uses with replacing fish meal with soybean meal here. So feeding a lot of fish, shrimp, tuna, just a number of different species of fish we can use soybean meal for. It's a very versatile crop, a very neat crop, and it does well in our climate here in Ohio. Some other things, some paints, stains. I think we've used it in some lotions, some hand lotions, hand sanitizers, things like that. So just a ton of uses for soybean meal. Also, or soybean oil, excuse me. Also, there's some automotive applications, your door panels, your dashes in your cars, just a lot of neat stuff that these soybeans can do.
Very
and we
good.
Can't forget about the edible beans that we have, your tofus, and things like that.
Yeah, very good, Nathan. There's a question here that was submitted ahead of time. It's a good question. We're going to go back to the plant a little bit. In average, how long does it really take for the plants to produce a bean that you can harvest?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and I'll flip it around here so you guys can see me here in the cab, maybe. So we usually plant our soybeans around April or May to June time frame is when we're busy planting, and then obviously we're harvesting now here in October through November. So there's different maturity ranges on these soybeans, and soybeans are a little different in the fact that they kind of use the length of day to determine how long they're going to stay viable. So our soybeans out here, they basically start maturing when the days start getting shorter. As soon as the days start getting shorter and the sun starts setting a little earlier, they determine, well, it's time for us to start maturing and reproducing seeds for the next crop, and that's how we that's basically soybeans really neat like that. It's physiology that it knows the length of days and decides when it's time to start maturing to reproduce. Great question, guys.
Good question. Another question. Do we have someone who's going to ask a question? Director Dan?
Yeah, they kind of unmuted themselves, but go ahead there. Looks like our folks in Cincinnati have a question for us.
Ask your question.
Go ahead, Carly. Ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, Carly.
What do farmers do?
Besides. So
I think the question was, what do farmers do?
correct.
Okay, so I wear a number of different hats as my role as a farmer. First and foremost is obviously as a husband and a dad to my family. My day starts just like your parents' days do. I run my boys to school and to daycare in the morning, and I get my day started. And depending on the weather and the season, depends on a lot of what I do every day. But just a couple of things that I do. So obviously I farm. lot of day-to-day stuff involved with that. Also, I sit on the board of directors for the Ohio Soybean Council, and I'm the research committee chair for that. So look at a lot of different research proposals along with Tom's help and another gentleman by the name of Barry McGraw. They do all my hard work. I just have to decide whether that's a good fit for the farmers of Ohio. I also am the president of the board of directors for the co-op that we haul our grain to. So we have meetings in there all the time. But I'm constantly looking at the weather. I'm not a meteorologist, but I have to know what the weather's going to do, and the weather dictates a lot of my day. And just making day-to-day decisions, treat it a lot like a job. It's not 8 to 5. This whole last week we've spent, I think we've been in the field for 6 days straight here, and basically working 16 to 18-hour days all the time. Get home at 11 o'clock at night and go to bed, take a shower and then go to bed, and start the day over the next day. Great question, though. Thank you.
Good. Director Dan, do you want to start going down the list of questions for us?
Sure, looks like an older question. Go ahead.
What different headers are used for like what are the different headers used for harvesting different crops?
Very good.
Yes, great question. So the header that you guys saw before, that I showed you that's on the combine currently, we use this one to harvest soybeans and wheat. So this has multi-uses. And then our other head that we have is what we call a corn head that has really long snouts. All of our corn's planted in 30-inch rows. So we use that corn head to gather the corn in. Anybody else have a question?
Yep, we're just going to keep going right on down the line. If somebody is in front of the camera, we will get you on the line here and get a question. So here we go.
How does the thing in the front get the crops in the tractor?
Okay, good question. So I'll pull this thing off of here again. We'll flip you around. So if you guys can see down there, I don't know if Dan's can flip us around to the screen.
You got it.
Oh, there's Tom. Okay, there we go. So as you can see, as we're going down through the field, those knives are cutting those soybeans off. And the big reel on the front that just keeps going around and around and around with all the fingers on it, kind of pull the crop into that drum. And then this long drum down here, the real shiny one, you'll see looks like it just keeps gathering it closer and closer to the middle of the head. And then, like I said, it goes into that throat, into the combine. Great question.
How many bushels have you got in the field?
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
How many bushels have you got in a field?
What's the largest amount of bushels that you've been able to get from one field?
Oh, that's it's hard to say. The largest number in one day I think we've harvested on corn has been 14,000 bushels in one day on a cornfield. A good day on soybeans, we can harvest roughly about 8,000 to 9,000 bushels a day.
How many soybeans do you get a month?
How many soybeans do you get a month?
How many soybeans do you get a month? Well, we don't really measure it in months, so my harvest window is very short. We don't harvest for very long, so all of my crops come off within about a 1 month period. So on average, total bushels that we harvest is right around 30 to 40,000 bushels of soybeans.
Okay, oh, go ahead. How long?
How long can you run by cutting the crops?
How long does the combine run while cutting the crops?
Throughout the day, this combine will run roughly about 16 to 17 hours, and I'm in the seat for all of those hours for the most part. But we have soybeans are our largest crop here on the farm, and so we have about a little over 1,000 acres of soybeans, and so it roughly takes us about 10 days to harvest all of our soybeans. About 100 acres a day is what we can run.
Do y'all produce any other crops?
What's that?
Do y'all produce any other crops?
Yes. Okay.
Yes, we do produce other crops. So we produce corn, and our corn's used, a lot of our corn around here is used for ethanol or livestock feed. We also produce wheat, and the wheat around here it is used for bakery type things. Nabisco has a plant right up on the river up here, and that's what a lot of our wheat's used for.
How fast can the thing go?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
How fast can the tractor go?
How fast can it go?
Yeah, so this combine that we're in right now, I am driving at about 5 mile an hour right now is our harvest speed, but it'll do 24 mile an hour down the road.
How much machine do you have on your farm?
Say that
How many
again.
what do we have on our farm?
How much machines do you have on your farm?
Machines.
No, how many machines
Oh,
do you use on your farm?
machines. Okay, so we have one combine, and with the livestock operation, we have about 6 tractors. They vary in size from a 4-wheel drive tractor, which is an articulated tractor, all the way down to a small little utility tractor. But we have 6 tractors. I also have a self-propelled sprayer. It's what we consider a high crop sprayer. We have our own one of those. Excuse me for a second. We're trying to coordinate some dumping here on the end of the field. But yeah, that's about how many machines we have on our farm. We have 2 skid loaders that we use for the livestock side of things. That do they scoop all the manure out of the pens. And then we have 4 semis. So I think that covers about all the machines.
Oh, very good.
We had a question come in via chat too here. Privately to me, it says, are there different types of soybeans? So maybe we can just talk about variety and things like that. So are there different types of soybeans or different types of soybean varieties that you use?
Yes. So there are many different types, different genetics, different companies. I think the biggest difference is the edible soybeans as compared to our marketable soybeans that we use for oil, for the industrial side of things. There's also different, what we call genetics. Obviously, everybody's heard of the Roundup Ready varieties. There's also some Liberty Link, and that basically just dictates what chemicals we can use on our fields. When it involves different types of weeds, because obviously when we have weeds in the fields, we don't produce as good of crops. So yes, there are very many different types of soybeans and varieties. And I think I mentioned before the edible ones that are used for the tofu, your bean sprouts and your salads, things of that nature.
Very good, Nathan. Thank you. Yeah, there are all kinds of varieties of soybeans. It can depend on where you're located, what your climate is, what your temperature in the spring and fall is. There's some that are higher in oil or have specific types of oils that are for certain uses and so forth. I'd like to wrap it up. Nathan talked about soybeans going to the elevator to his local co-op, and he mentioned that a lot of soybeans are exported. But I just wanted to go through real quick what happens to a soybean after it leaves the field. So Nathan mentioned that it goes to the elevator. That's local. Then there are various modes of transportation that are used. This is a truck, as Nathan mentioned, semis unloading soybeans at the elevator. From there, they can go into rail cars. They can be transported by truck. They might go on a barge to go down the Mississippi River or another river to a port, as Nathan mentioned, the St. Lawrence Seaway, to go out to the northeast. A lot of soybeans go through New Orleans, Louisiana, so they travel down the Mississippi and go into cargo vessels to make the ocean voyage. So markets in other countries are very important to soybean farmers. Are there any other questions for us at this time? Here we go.
How many bushels do you get per acre?
Great question. So roughly my average this year, we're a little bit below where I thought we were going to be. A lot of that's due, we had really dry weather here. But usually we're right in the mid 55 bushels the acre is usually where we're at. That's where most of the fields have been at this year. Right now, the field that I'm running, these beans are averaging 60 bushel the acre. Very good beans here. And so that's usually where we're at.
Very good.
Great question. Dan, did you have a bunch of other questions from some people in Cincinnati too that I needed to answer?
Tom, were there any questions there that you wanted to get answered for certain?
I think some of them have been answered already. Why don't we let this young man ask his question, then I'll go through the last questions.
Is there a lot of storm damage?
I'm talking about storm damage to crops.
No, we did not have storm damage, is what he said.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We did not have any storm damage here. Most of our damage, I wouldn't really call it damage, but we did not receive any rain basically the entire month of June or July. And that really hurt us here. We had a really wet spring. We were late getting our crops in the ground to get planted, but we hardly had any rain. Luckily, where we're located here in Northwest Ohio was once the Great Black Swamp. So this ground holds a lot of water. There's a lot of ditches in this area. So our main concern usually is getting water away. But this year, we definitely did not have enough water, and that's why our soybeans aren't producing as good as they usually do. So great question. Thank you.
Did you have another question, Director Dan?
Yeah, we can pull one up.
How long does it take for the crops to grow?
We covered that a little bit ago, but yeah, so basically, like I said earlier, the crops are planted in April and May and into June, and then here the beginning of October is when we usually start harvesting. So just a few months, it's amazing how fast these plants will grow. I know some of our corn will grow an inch a day almost in some instances.
And how many crops a year, Nathan?
That is another great question. So that varies. Some of our wheat that we plant comes off early enough we can plant a soybean crop behind that, so we can get 2 crops in 1 year out of that. We also do that with some of our cover crops too. The cover crops that we plant that hold our nutrients into our soil, they allow us to harvest that cover crop for a hay crop for our livestock, and then we usually plant soybeans behind those. Great question.
I think that the bushels and all of that. Okay, Gracie.
Oh,
Good. So how do we prepare the field? How is the field prepared in the spring for planting?
Yes, great question. So in some instances, this field, for example, we no-tilled this field. This was corn last year. We just came in with the planter and planted it. Other fields that we have, we'll run what we call a disc or a field cultivator through them. If we've got a little bit of some weeds or things like that that we want to get out of the way, we want to try and give our crops the best chance they have to grow. So most of the time we do no-till, but some of the time, especially where we're hauling our manure, we have to incorporate that manure in the soil. So we do a little bit of light tillage with that. Great question, guys.
and any last question? Here we go.
How long does it take to plant?
How long does it take to plant the bean?
Yep.
Yeah, so it varies. Most of our beans, I can plant 1,000 acres of beans in 4 days. But that if we're doing that means the tractor never shuts off. My brothers and I take shifts running the tractor. The tractor can run for 24 hours a day. We just have to keep putting beans in it so it keeps putting them in the ground. But that's usually on average about 1 week it will take us to plant 1,000 acres of soybeans. I know there was one question Dan had from some people in Cincinnati about how did I get started farming. And obviously I'm a 5th generation farmer. We've been farming pretty much my whole life. I started driving a tractor when I was about 8 years old. As soon as I could reach the pedals on the tractor and steer the steering wheel, that's when I was running. But really got my start in 4-H and FFA. That was where I really started honing my skills. Learned a lot from my father. Oh, you guys just went down. Learned a lot from my father and grandfather about how to farm and how to do things correctly, how to take care of the soil. But 4-H and FFA were really a big part of why I do what I do today. And I know I think there's a class or a school, General Rosencrantz. Actually, I think your assistant, Ms. Toma, she was actually in 4-H with me. So if there's anybody there at General Rosencrantz, she was a big part of my 4-H career there. So a little bit to tie you guys in a little bit there in Sunbury. Questions, though.
Terrific questions. Thank you for all your participation. I had one last question. Director Dan, can you ask that question? It's something about how many people.
Yeah, we have one last question come in via chat here. It says, how many people can fit in that combine with you? I know you might have a partner that comes with you in the combine every now and again.
Yeah, so both of my boys in the combine, comfortably we can fit 2 to 3. But if we really jam-pack this combine, there's a lot of room to spread out in here. We've got, I can stretch my arms out all the way each side in this cab. But I would say we could probably fit, if you wanted to make it into a clown car, we could probably fit close to 6 people in.
You could probably make it pretty comfortable. Is it climate controlled? Does it have a radio? What do you have in there?
Oh, yes. That's how I bide my time. We've got a radio in here. It is climate controlled. I can control, right now I think I have it set on 73 degrees in here, and I'm comfortable. It's very quiet in this cab compared to, if you think about what my grandfather and father, they had to sit on the elements. We're very fortunate to have the technology that we have today. They had to sit out and really breathe in all the dust. But now inside these cabs, we don't have to endure any of that anymore. We've got a cabin. It's just like the inside of your mom and dad's car, really. Just a lot more functions and a lot more things to look at.
Well, thank you, Nathan. We really appreciate your participation in the field trip today. I think it's gone extremely well. We had a tremendous amount of excellent questions from our classrooms. So classrooms, let's thank Nathan and Director Dan for putting on the show today. And now we're going to show you each classroom is 5 waves. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.